Oh, absolutely. This is about dollar dominance. 98% of stablecoins worldwide right now are pegged to the US dollar.
Hmm.
If we want to cement that dominance in the stablecoin market and ensure that every stablecoin used across the globe is pegged to the US dollar, we need to pass this framework.
This episode is brought to you by Proppy, which is leading the charge in putting real estate on chain. Proppy is a game changer. You can buy and sell real estate with cryptocurrencies using the Proppy platform, which is powered by a blockchain, of course, and they have a native token called Pro. And I've been an investor in the Proppy token since 2018. So Proppy is a licensed Web3 pioneer operating since 2017. They have facilitated over $4 billion in transactions. They're putting titles and deeds on chain. They use Coinbase for their crypto escrow service. So this is a great platform. And once again, they are ahead of the curve when it comes to putting real estate on chain. And they just launched a great campaign where you can earn some of the Proppy tokens. And it's simply by doing tasks such as sharing their vision video, signing up and inviting a friend, and much more. So if you'd like to learn more about Proppy, visit the link in the description. Hey folks, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and joining me is Cody Carbone, who is the CEO at the Digital Chamber. Cody, great to see you.
Great to see you as always, Tony. Thanks for having me back.
Cody, I had to get you on. We're talking on Wednesday, June 18th, a day after the Genius Act has passed the Senate. Historic, exciting. What are your thoughts?
That was cool, right? I mean, 68 votes. That's hard to fathom how far we've come over the last several years. The fact that a US stablecoin regulatory framework has now passed the Senate with overwhelming bipartisan support. It is a massive achievement. I think there were a lot of doubters, even as recently as a month ago, when it seemed like this bill could not overcome procedural hurdles. But to see it get to this point, and now move forward is incredible. So it's a huge shout out to the industry leaders who have put a lot of time and effort into getting this bill to a good place, to the leaders in the Senate, Senator Haggerty, Lummis, Scott, also Brooks Gillibrand, who are the initial co-sponsors. And even despite some pushback from some colleagues, they were able to push this through. It is really a remarkable achievement. Job's not done, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But it really is incredible, and everyone should, look at this as like, wow, we have really overcome a lot to get to this point.
Absolutely. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the first crypto bill to make it through the Senate, right?
First crypto bill to make it through the Senate, standalone crypto bill. There have been some, congressional resolutions that would disapprove some rulemakings under the CRA that have made it through, like the DeFi broker rule. But this is the first standalone non-resolution to make it through the U.S. Senate, which is awesome.
That's amazing. So now it goes to the House, and usually it's the reverse, right? It goes from the House to the Senate, but how come it's reversed this time around?
I think it was just in terms of priority. The Senate wanted to move very quickly out of the gate. They had their Genius Act, and the House was not slow either. They had the Stable Act. But then the House had some other priorities to tackle, and that was market structure. And the House had a history of starting with market structure with Fit 21 last Congress. So that is where everyone's attention turned to. And so it almost seemed like there was an unspoken deal between the House and the Senate. Senate, you focus on stablecoin legislation. You have the momentum and you have the progress there. You have the bipartisan bill. The House will focus on the market structure bill, and now we have the Clarity Act. So now this bill goes to the House. And I think that's the $1 million question is, well, how quickly can we move this? TBD, I have a lot of thoughts on how quickly we can move this and how quickly this should move, but that's where we stand right now.
So on that note, the big question everybody's going to have, right? Can this get pushed through the House before or by the August recess, where President Trump's told Congress, get it to my desk before the August recess?
Well, if we're listening to President Trump and the White House Crypto Council, I don't think they have an option. I think they have to get this done by August 1st. The answer is overwhelmingly yes. I mean, this was a massive bipartisan vote. You do not see 65 plus votes in the US Senate very often. You don't see 60 votes very often. That's why there's always legislative gridlock there. To have 68 with 18 Democrats joining almost every Republican support this, That is a huge signal that shows, hey, this is a national priority at this point. We need to move this legislation. And that signal is not lost on House leadership.
Mm,
House leadership wants to move a stablecoin bill. I think what they are dealing with right now and what they are debating is what is the most effective way to do that, where we can ensure bipartisan success and get this to President Trump's desk, as well as moving priority number two, the Clarity Act. And
mm.
so the debate that is ongoing right now is, do we move the Genius Act as is and we just get the stablecoin bill to the president's desk and we sign that a law and we notch that win? Some people are in that camp. The other option is, do we attach this with the Clarity Act? Because this received so much bipartisan support, and the Clarity Act has really struggled to receive that bipartisan support to this date. If you watch some of the markups from, which feels like a year ago, but just last week in House Financial Services and House Ag on the Clarity Act, there is a lot of partisan tension here
Mm,
related to the White House and the president's involvement in digital assets. This does not have the bipartisan reception or warmth as stablecoin legislation right now. House negotiators are still working to get more Democrats on board. And so, where House Republicans are, they're saying, all right, if we're struggling with getting Democrats to support this market structure bill, can we appease them and earn their support by attaching a bill that they do support to it, which is the Genius Act or the Stable Act or some form of that? That is the debate right now. Now,
mm.
there are huge risks to that.
Yeah.
At what point do they say, okay, we've been negotiating with Democrats for so long, they don't seem to be biting on supporting the Clarity Act, even if we attach the Genius Act? Um, do they risk not passing either bill by trying to stall them and trying to move them together? And then it's August 1st, and there are other priorities at play. We have the reconciliation bill. We then get into the fall, and there's appropriations, and there's a lot of other things on the legislative calendar. At what point do they say, okay, we can't risk that any further. We just need to pass the stablecoin bill as is? Or hopefully they broker a deal. Democrats support the Clarity Act, and they are able to move these fairly quickly over the next 6 weeks because that's the timeline we're dealing with, able to move both bills. A lot unknown right now.
Mm.
Where the House is right now is they are still trying to negotiate with Democrats to earn their support on the Clarity Act. That big last negotiating piece is on conflict of interest provisions, targeting government officials who could potentially issue digital commodities or prohibiting them from doing so, how government officials could hold crypto assets or digital commodities in this bill. It doesn't seem like those negotiations are going great right now, if you read some reports, but they're ongoing, and I know they're having them in earnest. So a lot is to be determined in terms of timing. I am hopeful that we're able to get one big, beautiful bill in the crypto space. We're able to pass market structure. We're able to pass stable coins, but there's going to have to be a calculated risk here. And at some point, if you're the House leadership and you're French Hill and you're Speaker Johnson, do you say, okay, you know what? The Clarity Act, we still have a lot of negotiating to do. We need to pause and punt this to the fall after the August recess. We have stable coins in front of us. Let's move this now. I just hope that we don't miss huge opportunities here and we at least get stablecoin legislation done and we get Clarity Act done, but we need to move very, very quickly.
Great analysis, great insight there. Boy, I'm hoping they can get this through because I'm seeing a lot of the talking points, right, with people concerned about Trump and his crypto businesses and so forth. But there does seem to be a level of urgency with the stablecoin bill. If I'm reading between the lines of what Scott Bessent has been saying, and this is a new avenue for supporting the U.S. dollar, with stablecoin issuers having to back their reserves with U.S. Treasuries, there seems to be a high level of urgency beyond just crypto.
Oh, absolutely. This is about dollar dominance.
Mm,
98% of stablecoins worldwide right now are pegged to the US dollar.
mm,
If we want to cement that dominance in the stablecoin market and ensure that every stablecoin used across the globe is pegged to the US dollar, we need to pass this framework. We have to because there are other jurisdictions chomping at the bit to have stablecoins packed to their own currency, whether it is China or it is Russia or it's Europe with the digital euro or it's, the UK or it's Singapore. There are other jurisdictions who are desperate to have stablecoin pegged to their own currency. The other aspect of this is that with this trade war that has been going on with the White House and other countries, and as we are negotiating trade agreements, there has been a large sale of US Treasuries.
Yeah.
Best way to rectify that and have huge purchases of US Treasuries is by passing a stablecoin framework where folks need to be collateralized with those US Treasuries. And we will see a massive demand across the globe if we pass this framework. Tether, I think, is the seventh largest purchaser of US Treasuries in the world. There are going to be, if we pass this bill and have a US framework, 1,000 stablecoin companies
Hmm.
go overnight. There's going to be almost every single financial institution in the US is going to issue a stablecoin, whether it's JP Morgan or Bank of America, or there's a conglomerate of them, community banks, asset managers, hedge funds. There's going to be thousands and thousands of stablecoins that are all going to need to purchase US treasuries to be collateralized under this bill. That is a massive way to fix some of our economic problems, especially as other countries are selling US treasuries in the trade war. So, for the economic security and economic prosperity of the United States, outside of digital assets completely, stablecoins are a massive tool to preserve dollar dominance and dollar leadership across the globe.
You mentioned Tether. A big question that's out there, when this legislation becomes law, is that going to affect Tether in a negative way? Kind of what the EU MiCA regulations did, or do you? I see their CEO is in the United States talking to different folks, regulators, and much more. Do you think they might be able to get things in line with this bill?
I think so. If they want to have access to the U.S. market, which I'm hoping everyone does, most liquid capital markets in the world, I think they'll get in line with this bill, and I think they have the resources to do so. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get domiciled in the U.S. or they're going to be licensed in the U.S. But there are agreements and provisions in the Genius Act that allow non-US domiciled issuers to issue US-backed stablecoins. They have to go through a pretty rigorous standard setting test. They have to show that their jurisdiction of where they are regulated or where they are domiciled has similar uh, frameworks, consumer protections as the US. They have to get approval from the US Secretary of Treasury. So it's not easy. But this we're talking about the largest stablecoin in the entire world that is US backed. They're going to have to become over collateralized. They're going to have to follow with these standards. But if they want to have access to the US market, they can absolutely exist here. And I have seen no reason why they wouldn't. And I don't see any reason why the US wouldn't want them to. So I am very optimistic that Tether and other non-US companies that have US backed stablecoins will be able to operate under this bill.
Mm. Now, a big question a lot of folks have is who's reviewing these bills? We know Congress, they've got a lot on their plate, right? They got a country to run and all that. Some may not be as tech savvy as others. Is the industry, are you and the folks at the Digital Chamber reading through these bills and making sure they have the right things in there?
I have to give a massive shout out to both the stablecoin bill and the market structure bill. The work that is being done by congressional staff on these bills is incredible. They are moving at a pace that we have never seen in terms of Congress, and they are doing so by being very transparent and very welcoming to industry feedback. So when we talk about the stablecoin bill and the genius, some of the staff of Senator Haggerty, of Senator Scott, of Senator Gillibrand, Senator Lummis, Senator Also Brooks, those staff have been working on this and reaching out to industry proactively to ensure that these bills make sense, that these bills make it where US stablecoin companies or anyone interested in issuing US backed stablecoin can do so. And it makes sense technically, it makes sense economically, it makes sense in terms of regulatory compliance. They have done an incredible job in reaching out to industry, reaching out to trade associations like us who represent large portions of the industry, inviting us to have a seat at the table. So every step along this way, every discussion draft, every amendment, every manager's amendment that you have seen introduced, and there's been a lot of them for the Genius Act. We've had, I bet over 10 iterations of this bill over the last 6 months. Industry has been invited to have a seat at the table and provide feedback. And the staff, and they're putting a lot of time in this, has been receptive to that feedback at every step of the way. That is not always the case. Staff can be, they can spend time writing a 100-page bill and they can be very protective over that and say, no, I've done this the right way. I don't want your feedback. You don't want to be regulated. And that hasn't been the case at all here for the Genius Act, for the Clarity Act, when you're dealing with the House Financial Services Committee and the House Ag Committee. So industry, yes, I can give everyone, I hope, a sense of relief. Industry has had a say in every step of the way for both of these bills. As well, there's been, they reach out to the regulators. And so when you look at the market structure bill, the SEC, the CFTC are providing technical assistance to make sure as that they're going to be the primary regulators of these instruments, that they can do so successfully. On the stablecoin bill, they're reaching out to some of the state regulators because the state regulators will have a piece. They're reaching out to the prudential regulators at the federal level, like the OCC and Treasury, to make sure that they can comply and that these make sense from a government regulatory system as well. So the outreach has been tremendous. And again, not always the case. We didn't necessarily see that last Congress as well.
Yeah.
The staff have done an incredible job.
That is great to hear, that the industry is weighing in, and you also have the regulators. So that's really, really awesome to hear. Now, speaking of the regulators, the SEC, they've been holding a lot of roundtables. They've been engaging with the industry, a lot of transparency, Cody. I mean, things we were waiting to see for many years. They've been sharing clarity even before these legislation bills are passed into law. Clarity on staking and different things, mining and much more. What are your thoughts on how things are going at the SEC?
It's been remarkable. I am beyond impressed, and they have over exceeded my expectations. When I met with the SEC Crypto Task Force, we initially met with them before the Crypto Task Force was even formed. And there was just this idea of what it would look like in December of 2024, so after the election. And then we were their first meeting from the Digital Chamber in February of this year. The number one message was we are going to rebuild trust with the industry. We are going to over communicate. We are going to over invite people in. We are going to have more and more events that will be transparent, open to the public, where the industry feels like that they can have their voice heard, not just for today, but overcome for the last 4 years of being silenced or kept out of the building. Rebuilding trust in every meeting I have had with the SEC and the SEC Crypto Task Force has been the number one priority. They are now starting to show that, and that is being illustrated through the guidance documents that they are putting out, through the roundtable agendas that they are holding. And I imagine the next step is going to be some formal notice and comment rulemakings now that Chair Atkins has been in his position for 2 to 3 months. We will start to see some of those rulemakings. It's been remarkable. I don't know how they can even top this, and I'm sure that they will. But having a regulator whose core mission is to protect the integrity of the markets and to protect consumers and investors, reach out to industry to understand why we are building these projects. What are the problems we are trying to solve through digital assets and blockchain technology, and have them provide honest and candid feedback and find opportunities where this can work because they understand the missions and they're willing to listen to all of the builders in this space. That's unheard of. And so it is a huge kudos to the entire Trump administration because we're not just seeing this at the SEC, we're seeing this at every agency level. This prioritization of transparency and accountability to make sure they're listening. That doesn't mean that things have been easy at the SEC or that they are just like letting us skate by at the SEC or the OCC or the CFTC, whoever. They've been very honest and they have no problem being honest. Be like, oh, I don't think that'll work.
Hmm.
Or this is why we can't do this. Or you're going to need this in place to do this. Or you're going to need an act of Congress to really get the clarity that you want. But just having them tell us that instead of saying, oh, you're going to get an enforcement action, or here's a Wells notice, or you better not do that, is a breath of fresh air.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned those other agencies. Obviously, we got the SEC has done a full 180, but obviously there's different hurdles that we have to, overcome, whether it be at the OCC, the Fed, the FDIC, with Operation Choke Point 2.0. Do you think the majority of their hurdles and roadblocks have been moved out of the way that even though there's maybe some official language that's needed, that the all the roadblocks for this industry have been moved out of the way.
It's getting better. Not every roadblock has been satisfied. We are still hearing some instances of Operation Choke Point, and I think it's not necessarily because of the regulators. While the regulators do set the tone, some of the staff that are at these agencies are career staff, and they have been there for years, and they still hold a lot of keys. Like it's not every day that a bank, let's say, that wants to custody crypto, that they are talking to the chairman at the OCC or the chairwoman at the FDIC, or they're talking to the Fed governors. They're talking to the examiners that have been at the agency for 20 years, or, whoever on the supervisory side, who may be following the same playbook that they've been following over the last 4 or 5 years and still feel that these assets are very risky. It takes a village. We're going to need more leadership from the agency heads, and they've been doing a great job. But to really reach out to all parts of the different agencies to ensure that everyone is singing from the same song sheet. So it takes time. We're only 6 months into this administration, which seems crazy.
Right.
But I'm hoping that when we have this conversation 6 months from now, or a year from now, or at the end of the Trump administration, that yes, every roadblock has been moved. Now, the other piece of that is we have to pass legislation, because while we can remove all of these roadblocks from an executive branch and administrative perspective, there is nothing right now stopping the next administration, who maybe is hostile, hopefully not, to digital assets, from putting all of those roadblocks back in and implementing them. The only way to stop them is by having legislative clarity that can stand the test of time and be administration proof.
This may be a rookie question, and it seems so simple, but I'm curious. Let's say those bills get passed. They are going to get passed. I'm going to put it out there in the universe, right?
Let's manifest it.
And 2 years from now, there's a new technology or a new sector of the crypto industry that is, comes on the scenes, and everybody's like, how do we navigate this? Can amendments be added to those respective bills to give clarity?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So you can amend. I mean, we've seen amendments to legislation over decades. The Clarity Act right now amends some of the securities legislation from the 1930s and 40s. So, like the 1933 Securities Act, this legislation provides amendments to that. So we can always see amendments to accommodate new innovation or new technologies. And that's how Congress has worked over the last, forever. So yes, to your question, just overwhelmingly, yes, we can see amendments. They're tough. Legislation is always much harder than the quick, action of a pen from a president or from an agency head. But I'm hoping that we have the opportunity right now. We have bipartisan support of a lot of these bills. We have bipartisan support to do something on crypto and to lead. So if we can at least pass the initial frameworks now, we can build off of them over the next 100 Congresses as more innovations in this ecosystem continue to happen.
Exciting times, Cody. I mean, better days for sure. Are there any upcoming hearings that we need to know about?
Big one that was just announced next week in the Senate Banking Committee on bipartisan frameworks for digital assets. So, we talked about at the outset of the call, the Senate has been focused on stablecoins. The House, while yes, they have done work on stablecoins, have been focused more recently on market structure legislation through the Clarity Act. Now, with stablecoins off the Senate docket, where do they go? They go to market structure, and it's their turn to focus on it as well. And so, this hearing in Senate banking on June 24th will be one of the big kickoff for them on how they tackle market structure legislation. I wouldn't be surprised that we're having this hearing in Senate banking if we see a corresponding hearing in Senate agriculture as well. Just like the House, both the House Agriculture and Financial Services Committee are focused on market structure bill and have a say. Same thing in the Senate. Senate Banking and Senate Ag will need to have a say and build this bill together. So exciting stuff. I expect we'll see more market structure hearings in the Senate as the House continues to work on their bill and hopefully pass it and pass it back over to them. And then in the House, I'm hoping that we see, maybe next week we start to see some movement as these bills are already through committee. the Clarity Act is through both the committees, that we start to see some floor movement if they're able to negotiate some of those conflict of interest provisions.
Cody, I hope our next conversation that we have
Are we
is,
popping champagne?
yeah, we're popping champagne. These bills are on President Trump's desk, and he's, in the process of signing the signature,
Yeah.
putting
We'll
the
do it. We'll do this live outside the White House at the signing ceremony.
I will happily do that. We'll have to figure that out, but yeah, that would be amazing. Cody, always great stuff, man. I appreciate your insights. Thank you so much.
Love talking to you as always, Tony. Thanks, man.